The dark alley echoed with the sound of hurried footsteps, the soft rustling of jackets blending with the distant hum of the city. 3 men, large and imposing, cornered a figure who seemed too small to stand a chance. A billionaire, dressed in an expensive suit, his face a mask of confusion and fear, was trapped in a narrow alley with nowhere to run. They taunted him, their voices low and menacing. As one of them moved closer, a wicked grin spreading across his face. Suddenly, a voice broke through the tension, sharp and commanding. "Stop, don't." The voice was clear. Despite the chaos unfolding, the billionaire froze, his breath catching in his throat. A little girl, no older than 10, stood at the entrance of the alley. Her small frame contrasted sharply with the danger she was walking into. She was holding a basketball in one hand, her other hand gripping it tightly. The men laughed, dismissing her presence. "What's a little girl going to do?" one of them sneered. But the girl's eyes were steady, unblinking. "I said stop," she repeated, her voice rising, firm. She took a step forward, her gaze locked onto the men, fearless. The billionaire, his heart pounding in his chest, watched in disbelief as the scene unfolded. His mind was racing. Who was this girl? Why was she standing up to these men? The alley was silent for a moment, the tension thick in the air. Then, with a swift motion, the girl hurled the basketball. It soared through the air with precision, striking the leader of the men in the chest, knocking him backward. The other 2 men hesitated, stunned by her unexpected move. The billionaire's eyes widened, his pulse quickening as the men faltered. "What are you doing?" one of the men growled, anger flashing in his eyes. But the girl wasn't backing down. She was already positioning herself for another throw. The basketball was more than just a game to her. It was her weapon, her voice, her shield. "I don't want to hurt you," she said calmly, her eyes flicking to the billionaire, then back to the men. "But I will if I have to." The men exchanged glances, the cocky bravado draining from their faces as they realized the seriousness of the situation. The billionaire, still stunned, took a slow step back, his eyes never leaving the girl. He had never expected to be saved by someone so young, so small. The men were retreating now, their plan crumbling under the weight of the girl's courage. They mumbled curses as they backed off, disappearing into the shadows. The alley was silent again, the danger momentarily gone. The little girl lowered the basketball, her shoulders slightly hunched from the effort, but her face was calm, composed. The billionaire stood there, speechless, his mind struggling to comprehend what had just happened. "Are you okay?" the girl asked quietly, looking up at him. He nodded slowly, his voice finally working its way out. I don't know what to say." The girl shrugged, as if it were no big deal. "It's just what I do," she said with a small smile, the kind of smile that suggested she had done this before. "I'm Anna." The billionaire, still processing the scene, looked down at her. He had been saved by a child who had just faced down danger with nothing but a ball and her courage. The billionaire stood there, still trying to process what had just happened. His heart was racing, and his mind was in a whirlwind of disbelief. A little girl, no older than 10, had just saved his life with nothing more than a basketball and sheer courage. He looked down at her, still trying to grasp the situation. Anna, the girl, stood there calmly, as if this kind of thing happened every day. The alley was quiet now, but the tension lingered in the air. The men who had attacked him were gone, but the weight of the moment was far from over. Anna slowly lowered the basketball, her hands trembling slightly from the adrenaline, but she didn't let it show. She took a step back, her gaze still steady as she watched the billionaire. He couldn't find his words. He was too stunned, too shaken by the entire scene. Finally, he found his voice. How did you know what was going to happen?" he asked, his voice soft with disbelief. Anna tilted her head, her eyes narrowing slightly as if she were considering his question carefully. "I saw them," she said simply. "I saw them walking down the street, and I knew they were trouble. I figured I'd have to do something before they hurt you." The billionaire shook his head, still trying to wrap his mind around it. "But you were just a kid. How could you know?" Anna shrugged, her face a mixture of determination and innocence. "I don't need to know everything. I just know when something isn't right." The billionaire felt a lump form in his throat. He had spent his life surrounded by power, wealth, and influence. Yet here was this little girl who had more courage in her small frame than he had seen in most of the powerful people he worked with. He looked down at her, trying to understand how she could be so fearless. "What's your name?" he asked. "Anna," she replied without hesitation. "Anna," he repeated softly, the name lingering in the air. "Thank you for saving me." Anna looked up at him, her eyes softening for a moment. "It's no big deal," she said, but there was a quiet pride in her voice. "It's just what I do." The billionaire couldn't help but smile. Despite everything that had just happened, despite the shock and fear still coursing through him, he felt a sense of relief wash over him. He was safe, thanks to this brave little girl. "I don't know what to say," he admitted, his voice quieter now. Anna shrugged again. "You don't have to say anything. I just did what needed to be done." The billionaire took a deep breath, feeling the tension slowly ebb away. He looked around the alley, then back at Anna. "I owe you," he said, his voice sincere. Anna shook her head. "You don't owe me anything. I did what anyone would have done." The billionaire was struck by how humble she was. Here she was, a child who had just faced down danger without a second thought, and she didn't expect anything in return. He felt a lump form in his throat once again. "You're a remarkable young girl," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Anna's expression softened, but she didn't respond. Instead, she glanced at the ground, her fingers nervously fiddling with the basketball in her hand. For a moment, the billionaire didn't know what to say. He had spent so many years in the world of business, surrounded by so many people, yet none of them had ever made him feel the way Anna did in that moment. He looked at her again, feeling a deep sense of gratitude that he couldn't quite express. "Can I do something for you?" he asked. Anna looked up at him, her eyes searching his face. "Like what?" she asked, clearly not expecting anything. The billionaire thought for a moment. "I don't know. But there must be something. You just saved my life." Anna smiled, a small, shy smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "You don't need to do anything," she said. "I'm just glad I could help." There was a long pause. The billionaire could feel the weight of the moment, the weight of everything he had just experienced. He had been saved, not by his bodyguards, not by his wealth, but by this young girl with a basketball and the courage to stand up to the world around her. He felt a wave of respect wash over him, deeper than anything he had ever felt in his entire life. He had been changed in that moment, and he knew it. Finally, he straightened up, his mind clearer now. "You're a hero," he said quietly. Anna looked at him, her expression unchanged, but there was a hint of something in her eyes. "Heroes don't need to be thanked," she said softly. "They just do what's right." The billionaire stood there for a moment, stunned by her words. He had always believed that the powerful were the ones who could change the world, but now, standing in that alley with Anna, he realized that sometimes it was the smallest voices that had the greatest impact. The billionaire sat in his sleek black car, his mind still spinning from the events that had transpired in the alley just hours earlier. Anna, the little girl with the courage of a lion, had saved his life, and now, he couldn't shake the image of her face. She had stood up to 3 men, without a second thought, and had done what no one else could. He found himself glancing at the window, lost in thought, trying to understand her. Who was she really? Why was she out there alone? As he sat there, his assistant, a young man named Mark, sat in the front seat, glancing back at him every so often. The billionaire had always been a man of logic, of facts. He had built his empire on knowing exactly what to do, what move to make next. But now, with Anna in his mind, he was stuck in a haze of questions. "Sir?" Mark's voice broke through his thoughts. "You okay?" The billionaire sighed, leaning back in his seat, rubbing his temples. "I don't know, Mark. That girl, Anna. I keep thinking about her." Mark glanced at him, his curiosity piqued. "The one who saved you?" The billionaire nodded, his eyes still distant. "Yes." "How could she do that? How could she face 3 grown men, all of them far bigger than her, and not even hesitate?" Mark was silent for a moment before responding. "Some people just have it in them, sir. That courage, that strength." The billionaire didn't respond right away. He stared out the window at the city streets passing by. He couldn't stop thinking about her. He had seen many people in his life, business partners, employees, even politicians, all of them powerful in their own right. But none of them had ever made him feel the way Anna had. He had been shaken to his core, not by the attack, but by the girl who had stepped in to save him. "She's not just any girl," he said, almost to himself. "There's something about her." Mark glanced back at him again, raising an eyebrow. "You think there's something special about her?" "I know there is," the billionaire replied, his voice steady but firm. "She knew exactly what to do. She wasn't scared. And she didn't even ask for anything in return." He paused, his mind racing. "She's just different. I need to know more about her." Mark remained quiet, but the billionaire could see the gears turning in his head. After a long pause, Mark spoke again. "What are you going to do, sir?" The billionaire looked at him, a new resolve in his eyes. "I'm going to find her. I need to know her story." The rest of the ride passed in silence as the billionaire made his decision. The girl who had saved him wasn't just a hero in a moment of crisis. There was something more. He felt it deep inside him. He had to meet her again, talk to her, and understand her. The next day, the billionaire's team began searching for Anna. They scoured the streets, asked around, and followed every lead. After hours of searching, they found her. She was in a small park near the alley where the attack had happened, sitting alone on a bench, her basketball beside her. The billionaire stepped out of his car, his heart pounding with anticipation. He approached her cautiously, not wanting to startle her. When she saw him, her expression remained neutral, but he could tell she recognized him. "Anna," he said softly, his voice calm but full of emotion. She looked up at him, her eyes guarded. "You're here," she said simply. The billionaire nodded. "I had to come. I've been thinking about you." Anna didn't respond immediately. She just looked at him, studying him, her small frame barely moving. Finally, she spoke. "What do you want?" Her voice was soft, but there was a sharpness to it, a strength hidden behind her words. The billionaire took a deep breath. "I want to know about you," he said. "Who are you? Why did you help me?" Anna's expression softened just slightly, but she didn't immediately answer. Instead, she picked up her basketball, bouncing it a few times on the ground. "I helped you because it was the right thing to do," she said after a moment. "You didn't deserve what they were doing to you." The billionaire took a step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "But why? You're just a kid. You could have run. You could have stayed out of it. Why didn't you?" Anna's gaze softened, but there was still a quiet intensity in her eyes. "I don't like bullies," she said simply, "and when I see something wrong, I can't just stand there." The billionaire stood there, taking in her words. There was something in her voice that struck him deep. She wasn't just speaking out of courage. She was speaking from a place of justice, of right and wrong. He felt a lump form in his throat, realizing that this little girl, this stranger, had a greater sense of morality than most of the powerful people he knew. "You're something else, Anna," he said softly. She shrugged, looking away. "I'm just me." The billionaire smiled, but it was a sad smile, filled with awe and respect. He knew now that Anna wasn't just a little girl in an alley. She was someone who had the power to change the world. And somehow, in that moment, he knew his life had just taken a turn he couldn't have expected. The billionaire stood in front of Anna, still trying to wrap his mind around everything that had just happened. He had come to find her, but now that he was standing here, face to face with the girl who had saved him, he found himself uncertain about how to proceed. His world had been turned upside down in an instant, and all he could think about was how this young girl had acted with more courage than anyone he had ever known. "I don't understand," the billionaire said, his voice low, almost pleading. "How could you have known what to do?" Anna didn't flinch. She had been staring at him with the same unflinching gaze she had when she had stood up to those men. She wasn't intimidated. "I told you already," she said, her voice calm and steady. "I just knew." The billionaire ran a hand through his hair, frustration building. "But you didn't just know. You acted. You stopped them. How did you do that?" Anna took a deep breath, her eyes never leaving his. "It's not hard to do the right thing. You just have to see it and do it." Her words hit him like a punch. It was something he had known all his life, but never had he heard it so plainly spoken by someone so young. "You're not like anyone I've ever met," he said, his voice full of awe. Anna didn't respond. She just stared at him with those steady, unwavering eyes. There was something about her that seemed to see through him, past the wealth, past the power, straight to the heart of who he was. It made him uncomfortable, but also made him feel something he hadn't felt in a long time: vulnerable. "Why did you help me?" he asked, his voice quieter now. "You didn't have to. You could have walked away. You could have ignored it. So why?" Anna looked down at her shoes for a moment, her fingers tracing the seams of her basketball shorts. "Because no one else did," she said softly. "I didn't want you to be hurt. I didn't want to see someone else getting hurt. And when you're scared, when you see someone hurting, you can't just walk away." Her words hung in the air, heavy and honest. The billionaire found himself at a loss for words. He was a man who had spent his life solving problems with money and influence. Yet here was this little girl who had solved the problem with nothing more than her courage and her sense of what was right. "You don't see that every day," he murmured, almost to himself. Anna nodded, her expression serious. "People forget. They get too busy. They don't see the little things that need fixing." The billionaire couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt. He had spent his life focused on his career, on his empire, on making more money, and in the process, he had lost sight of the things that really mattered. "What should I do?" he asked her, genuinely unsure. "I don't know," Anna replied, her voice quiet but firm. "I don't think you need to do anything. You just need to listen. Help people. Don't forget." The billionaire stood there, staring at her for a long moment. He realized, with a shock, that she was right. It wasn't about the big things; those were easy. It was about the little things, the moments when you could make a difference. And this little girl had reminded him of that. He looked down at her, his heart heavy with gratitude. "Thank you, Anna," he said softly, his voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for making me remember what really matters." Anna shrugged, her eyes flicking to the ground for a moment. "I didn't do it for you," she said simply. "I did it because it was the right thing to do." The billionaire felt a lump form in his throat. This girl, this child, had just done something he hadn't been able to do for years. She had reminded him of who he really was. He stood there for a moment, letting her words sink in. Finally, he spoke again. "I don't know if I can ever repay you for what you did," he said, "but I want to try. I want to help you." Anna shook her head, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "You don't need to help me," she said. "I don't need anything from you. I just wanted to do what was right." The billionaire looked at her, admiration in his eyes. "You're an incredible young girl," he said. "I don't know what I would have done without you." Anna shrugged again, not seeming to care for the praise. "It's no big deal," she said with a small smile. "It's just what I do." The billionaire smiled, a real smile, one that reached his eyes. He knew, deep down, that he would never forget Anna. She had changed him in a way he hadn't expected, and for that, he would always be grateful. The billionaire stood outside the small building, his mind still swirling from the conversation he had with Anna earlier that day. He had never expected to meet someone like her, someone so young, so fearless, and yet so wise. He had learned more from her in those few moments than he had in years of business meetings and high-powered negotiations. He couldn't stop thinking about her, about what she had said, about what she had done. He had never experienced anything like it before. He walked towards the entrance of the building, his thoughts racing. He had made a decision, and now, he was here to follow through with it. He couldn't keep living his life the way he had been. Anna had shown him a different path, one he never thought he would consider. He had spent his life focused on wealth, power, and status. But now, he knew that there was more to life than just those things. As he reached the door, he hesitated for a moment. What if this didn't work out? What if he couldn't keep his promise to Anna? What if he wasn't the man he thought he could be? He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. Inside, the room was quiet, filled with the soft hum of a few scattered voices. His assistant, Mark, was sitting at a desk in the back, sorting through some papers. Mark looked up when he saw the billionaire enter. "Sir," he said, standing up quickly, "is everything all right?" The billionaire nodded. "I need to talk to you," he said, his voice calm but determined. Mark's eyebrows furrowed. "Of course, sir. What's on your mind?" The billionaire walked over to the desk, taking a seat across from Mark. "I've made a decision," he said, his eyes meeting Mark's. I want to change the way I do business. I want to focus on something more important than just profits. Mark looked at him, surprised. What do you mean, sir? The billionaire took a deep breath. I want to help people. I want to invest in communities, in children, in people who need it the most. I want to make a difference. Mark sat back in his chair, staring at the billionaire. I don't understand, he said slowly. You want to focus on charity? On giving back? The billionaire nodded. Yes. I've been so focused on making money, on expanding my empire, that I've lost sight of what really matters, and Anna reminded me of that. Mark looked thoughtful for a moment, then nodded. I see. You want to invest in something that will last, something that has meaning. Exactly, the billionaire replied. I want to use my resources to do something good, to make sure that people like Anna, people who have so much potential, aren't overlooked. Mark seemed to consider this for a moment. But how will you do that? He asked. Where do you start? The billionaire leaned forward, his eyes bright with determination. I start by finding organizations, schools, communities that need help. I want to build programs that give children the tools they need to succeed. I want to invest in their futures. He paused for a moment, letting the weight of his words sink in. And I want to make sure that every child, no matter where they come from, has a chance to reach their potential. Mark nodded, his expression a mix of surprise and admiration. That's a big change, sir, he said, but it's a good one. The billionaire smiled, the weight on his shoulders easing slightly. It's the right one. He stood up, walking towards the door. I'll need your help, Mark. We'll need to make some changes, get things organized. Mark stood as well, his posture shifting from one of surprise to one of resolve. Of course, sir, whatever you need. As the billionaire walked out of the building, his mind felt clearer than it had in months. He wasn't sure what the future would hold, but he knew one thing for certain. He wasn't going to keep doing things the same way. He was going to make a real difference, starting with the people who had already changed his life. He had learned that from Anna. He walked down the street, his steps feeling lighter, his heart feeling fuller. The journey was just beginning, but for the first time in a long time, he felt like he was on the right path. The billionaire stood at the edge of the park, his eyes scanning the playground where Anna had been sitting just a few hours ago. He had decided to find her again, not just to thank her, but to fulfill the promise he had made to himself. He had learned something that day, something that had shifted the very foundation of his life. The wealth, the power, the high-rise offices, none of it had seemed as important after his encounter with Anna. He had been living for years, focused solely on building his empire, and in doing so, he had lost sight of the world around him. But now, as he watched the children playing, laughing, and running, he realized that there was so much more to life than success in business. There was a whole world of people, of potential, that he had ignored. And Anna, the little girl with a heart of gold, had shown him that it was never too late to make a difference. The billionaire took a deep breath, his resolve solidifying. He had already made the decision to change the way he did business, but now it was time to take action. He was going to do more than just donate money or fund projects. He was going to invest in people, the ones who didn't have the same opportunities he had, the ones who were often forgotten. He had to start somewhere. As he walked through the park, his thoughts raced. He had been thinking about Anna, about the life she had lived, and the future she deserved. He wasn't sure where to begin, but he knew he had to try. He had to make sure children like her didn't have to face the same struggles. His phone buzzed, interrupting his thoughts. He pulled it out of his pocket and saw a message from Mark. Sir, I found a few organizations that align with the direction you want to go. We need to meet and discuss how we can begin. The billionaire felt a rush of excitement. This was the first step, the first real step towards making the change he had been seeking. He quickly typed a response. Let's meet at the office in 1 hour. I'll bring the team. He put his phone away and continued walking. The park was peaceful, the sounds of children's laughter and birds chirping filling the air. He had always found peace in places like this, but today, it felt different. He felt like he was on the verge of something important. He couldn't help but think about Anna. Where was she now? What was her life like? Did she have anyone looking out for her? He didn't know, but he was determined to find out. His mind was set on making a real difference. The world didn't need another billionaire who cared only about profit. It needed people who were willing to invest in others, people who could change the future, one person at a time. When the billionaire arrived at the office, Mark was already waiting for him. "Sir," Mark said, standing up as the billionaire entered, "I've gathered some details on these organizations. We have a lot of options to consider." The billionaire nodded, his eyes focused. "Let's get to work," he said, sitting down at the conference table. "I want to focus on kids, specifically, the ones who don't have the opportunities they need to succeed. I want to build a foundation that provides resources, education, mentorship, everything they need to succeed." Mark nodded, scribbling notes on his tablet. "I've found a few places where we can start. They focus on after-school programs, scholarships, and vocational training. But we'll need to do more than just provide money. We need to make sure that we're providing real opportunities." The billionaire leaned forward, his eyes burning with determination. "I know. That's why I'm here. I don't want to just write checks and walk away. I want to be involved. I want to see these kids grow, thrive, and make something of themselves. We can give them the tools, but they have to take it from there. We just need to give them the chance." Mark's eyes widened slightly. "You want to get personally involved?" The billionaire nodded. "Yes. I've been living in my bubble for too long. I need to start living in the real world, in a world that needs me to make a difference." The room was silent for a moment, Mark processing the gravity of the billionaire's words. "This is a big change," Mark said slowly. "But it's a good one." The billionaire smiled, a small but genuine smile. "It's the right one. I'll start putting together a proposal for the first initiative," Mark said. "We'll need to get everything in place, but it can be done." The billionaire stood, his mind focused on the task ahead. He was no longer the man he had been just a few days ago. He had a new mission now, and he wasn't going to stop until he had made a real impact. "Let's get started then," he said, his voice steady with resolve. "The future is waiting, and it's time for us to help make it better." As the team gathered around, preparing for the new chapter ahead, the billionaire felt a sense of peace settle over him. For the first time in a long time, he felt like he was exactly where he was supposed to be. Days passed, and the billionaire, now fully immersed in his new mission, found himself walking through the streets of the city with a different purpose. He had been visiting community centers, after-school programs, and youth shelters, places that reached the kids who needed it most. Everywhere he went, he saw potential, and everywhere he looked, he was reminded of Anna. He couldn't help but think of how she had been the spark that lit the fire of change in him. He had spent so many years focused on business, and now he realized that success wasn't just about numbers and power. Success was about creating opportunities for those who didn't have them. It was about changing lives. As the billionaire stood outside a community center one chilly afternoon, his phone buzzed with a message from Mark. "Sir, we've found something. You need to see this." Intrigued, he opened the message, which contained a link to a local news story. The headline read, "Local Girl Saves Billionaire, Now Facing Threats from His Former Associates." His heart sank. The article described Anna and the incident with the three men, but it also mentioned that those men were connected to people the billionaire had once worked with. They were part of a network that had been involved in illegal activities, and now it seemed they were targeting Anna. The billionaire immediately felt a wave of concern wash over him. Anna had done nothing but act out of courage, and now her life was in danger. He quickly dialed Mark. "Get the team together," he said, his voice tight. "We need to find Anna and make sure she's safe." The feeling of helplessness that had once been foreign to him now settled deep within him. He had everything: power, wealth, influence, and yet, in this moment, he felt like there was nothing he could do. His mind raced with thoughts of how to protect Anna, of how to shield her from the consequences of the actions he had once allowed to continue unchecked. Within hours, the billionaire and his team were in motion, tracking down leads and gathering information on the men who had been threatening Anna. They reached out to local authorities, leveraging connections to get the necessary protection for her. The billionaire couldn't shake the guilt. He had built his fortune on the backs of people who had done things the right way. But now, he realized that he had also allowed a dark side to exist in the world he inhabited. Anna had exposed that side, and now he was forced to confront it. They found Anna at a small diner on the edge of town. She was sitting by herself, looking out the window as if she hadn't a care in the world. But the billionaire could tell from her posture that she was tense, that she knew something was wrong. He approached her cautiously, his heart pounding. "Anna," he said softly, sitting down across from her. She looked up at him, her expression unreadable. "You're in danger," he said, his voice low but filled with urgency. Anna's eyes flickered, but she didn't seem afraid. "I'm fine," she replied quietly. "I can take care of myself." The billionaire felt a surge of admiration for her, but it also made his heart ache. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. "I can protect you. I have the resources." Anna shook her head. "I've been on my own before. I'm not afraid." The billionaire took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. "I know you're strong," he said, "but this isn't something you have to handle by yourself. I care about you, Anna. You're not just some girl who saved me in an alley. You've made a difference in my life, and I won't let anything happen to you." There was a long silence between them. Anna didn't respond immediately. She simply looked at him, as if weighing his words. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter than before. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. "Because you showed me what it means to do the right thing," he replied, his voice thick with emotion. "And now I'm trying to make it right." Anna seemed to consider this for a moment, then nodded slightly. "I don't need saving," she said. "I just need to know you're not going to forget what you've learned." The billionaire felt a lump form in his throat. "I won't forget," he said. "I promise." They sat in silence for a while longer, the weight of the moment settling between them. The billionaire knew that his life had been forever changed by Anna's courage, and as much as he wanted to protect her, he also knew that he couldn't take away her independence. She was a force of nature, and in many ways, she had already saved him. He wasn't sure what the future would hold, but he knew one thing for certain: he would stand by her, no matter what. Together, they would face whatever came next. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty, but also a deep resolve that kept the billionaire moving forward. The threats against Anna were real, and as he sat in his office, his mind raced with plans to protect her. He had resources, he had power, but it felt like nothing could shield her from the danger that loomed. Every meeting, every phone call seemed to make him more aware of how fragile his world had become. He couldn't let the past mistakes repeat themselves, not with Anna involved. The billionaire leaned back in his chair, staring at the phone screen in front of him, the message from Mark flashing with a new update. "Sir, we have a lead on the men behind the threats. They're connected to a larger syndicate, and it's clear they won't stop until they get what they want." He set the phone down and closed his eyes for a moment. He had to think fast. He had the power to dismantle syndicates, to call in favors from people who owed him, but none of that would matter if he couldn't ensure Anna's safety. He couldn't afford to fail her, not after everything she had done for him. He got up from his desk and walked to the window, gazing out over the city. For the first time, he felt the weight of his decisions, and it was heavy. The world he had spent so long building, the one where power was everything, was nothing compared to the world Anna had shown him. She had stood in front of danger without a second thought, while he had spent so many years hiding behind his wealth, behind his influence. But now, he realized it was time for him to step out from behind those walls, just as she had. He had to confront the past, his own, and the one that was threatening her. A sudden knock at the door interrupted his thoughts, and Mark stepped in. "We need to act now, sir. We've located their hideout." The billionaire turned and looked at him, the gravity of the situation settling on his shoulders. "How much time do we have?" he asked, his voice steady but full of urgency. Mark hesitated, then replied, "Not much. If we don't move soon, they'll disappear." The billionaire nodded, his jaw tightening. "Then let's move." He was done waiting. He knew he couldn't let Anna face this alone, and he was done letting the darkness of his past influence his present. The billionaire knew that to protect her, he had to fight with everything he had. The journey he had started with Anna was no longer just about doing what was right for the future, it was about protecting the people who had changed him. As they prepared to leave, the billionaire couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. The man who had once been obsessed with power and wealth was now fighting for something much more important: the safety of a little girl who had reminded him of what truly mattered. The team arrived at the hideout within the hour, a nondescript building at the edge of town. The air was thick with tension as they moved into position. The billionaire had never felt more alive, his senses sharpened, his heart racing. He wasn't just here to play the role of the powerful businessman. He was here to protect Anna, and he would do whatever it took. As the team moved in, he couldn't help but think back to that alley, to the moment Anna had thrown the basketball and saved his life. She had acted without hesitation, and now, it was his turn to do the same. He could hear his heart beating in his ears as they surrounded the building. It wasn't just the stakes of the situation that made him nervous, it was the realization that everything he had done up to this point had been a preparation for this moment. This was his test. He would either be the man Anna had shown him he could be, or he would be a man who failed to live up to his own promises. As the team moved in, the billionaire's mind was clear. He wasn't just a businessman anymore. He was someone who had a responsibility to Anna, to the future, and to the world that had taught him that even the smallest voice could change everything. The tension in the air was palpable as they approached the hideout. It was a moment that seemed to stretch on forever, but when they breached the door and entered the building, there was no turning back. This was it. The billionaire had made his choice. He was no longer the man he had once been. He was ready to fight, ready to protect. And for the first time in his life, he was fighting for something that truly mattered. The air was thick with tension as the billionaire and his team moved cautiously through the building. Every step felt like it carried the weight of everything that had led him to this moment. He was no longer the man who made deals in boardrooms or closed multi-million-dollar contracts. He was here for Anna, and nothing else mattered. He could feel the adrenaline coursing through his veins as they approached the door where the men who had threatened Anna were holed up. His team was in position, ready to move. They had to act quickly. The longer they waited, the more likely the danger to Anna would increase. The billionaire felt his heartbeat quicken as he glanced at the door, knowing that once they entered, there was no turning back. There was no room for hesitation. He had to stand firm, just like Anna had done when she had faced those men. He couldn't afford to fail her now. The team leader, a seasoned security expert named Jack, motioned for everyone to get into position. The billionaire nodded, his jaw set in determination. "We move on my signal," Jack said quietly. The billionaire took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He thought about Anna, about the way she had looked at him earlier, with that unwavering strength in her eyes. She had saved him once. Now it was his turn to protect her. The door in front of them was ordinary, unremarkable even. But to the billionaire, it felt like the gate to a new world. The world where he was no longer just a bystander, but an active participant in making things right. "Now," Jack whispered. The billionaire didn't wait for a second signal. He knew what had to be done. He surged forward, his team following closely behind him. As the door was breached and the team rushed inside, the chaos that followed seemed to unfold in slow motion. The men who had been hiding out in the building were caught off guard. There was a moment of stunned silence, followed by the sharp sound of voices shouting and things being knocked over. The billionaire felt a rush of emotion, anger, fear, and a deep sense of responsibility as he moved toward the front of the room. His eyes locked onto the men, and for a split second, time seemed to freeze. He saw the fear in their eyes as they realized who they were facing. This wasn't just any billionaire standing before them. This was the man who had resources, who had connections, and now, who had the strength to stop them. One of the men made a move, rushing toward him, but the billionaire was ready. He sidestepped, his training in self-defense kicking in. He had learned over the years that strength didn't always come from size or power. It came from control, from precision. As the man fell to the floor, the billionaire's heart pounded in his chest, but he didn't stop. He wasn't going to back down now. The remaining men looked at each other, panic evident on their faces. They realized they were outmatched, but they weren't ready to give up without a fight. A tense standoff began, the billionaire standing firm, the men on the other side, their options dwindling. "It's over," the billionaire said calmly, his voice carrying through the room like a wave of authority. "You're not getting away with this." The leader of the men sneered, stepping forward with a knife in his hand. The billionaire could feel his pulse quicken, but he stood his ground. He wasn't going to let fear control him now. The man lunged, but before he could reach him, Jack tackled him to the ground. The rest of the team quickly subdued the remaining men, and within moments, the room was silent. The billionaire looked down at the men, his chest heaving with the weight of what had just happened. It had been a close call, but they had won. Anna was safe. He knew it wasn't over, there were still loose ends to tie up, and more work to do to ensure she would never be threatened again. But for now, they had won. As he stood there, taking in the scene, a wave of relief washed over him. He had done it. He had faced the darkness, and he had protected the one person who had made him see the world differently. As the police arrived and took over, the billionaire felt a deep sense of peace settle within him. He had changed. He wasn't the same man who had walked into that alley, the same man who had let his power and wealth dictate his life. Now, he understood the true meaning of strength. It wasn't in the wealth or the power, it was in the ability to stand up for what was right, to protect those who needed it most, and to never back down from doing the right thing. As he left the building, he thought of Anna again, the girl who had changed his life. He knew that this was just the beginning. He was going to do everything he could to ensure that children like Anna, children who had the courage to stand up and make a difference, would have the opportunities they deserved. He would be there for them, just as he had promised to be there for Anna. The aftermath of the operation settled like a heavy fog, the air thick with the weight of everything that had happened. The billionaire stood by the window of his office, staring out over the city, his thoughts still lingering on the events that had transpired. The men who had threatened Anna were in custody, their network beginning to unravel. He had done what he promised. He had stepped into the darkness and confronted it head-on. For her, for the future he was now determined to build. But as much as he tried to shake off the tension, he knew this wasn't over. This was only the beginning. Anna's safety was secure for now, but the threat was still there, lurking in the shadows. He had fought to protect her, but the world wasn't going to change overnight. The billionaire knew that he had to take a deeper, more proactive role in the fight against the system that had allowed men like those to thrive. It was clear that Anna's courage had sparked something inside him, something he couldn't ignore any longer. He had seen the cracks in the world, and now he needed to help rebuild it. He was no longer just the businessman who climbed to the top through ruthless competition. He was a man who understood what it meant to be responsible for the world around him. His mind kept returning to Anna's face, her strength, her determination. She had changed him in ways he couldn't have imagined. As he paced the floor, his phone buzzed on his desk. He picked it up and saw a message from Mark. "We need to talk. There's more we haven't uncovered yet." The billionaire's stomach tightened. He knew that there was still more to the story. The men they had apprehended were just the tip of the iceberg, and the deeper they dug, the more they found. He wasn't surprised. He had suspected all along that his past connections might come back to haunt him. What he hadn't anticipated was how much he would have to confront in order to protect the future he was trying to build. The door to his office opened, and Mark stepped in, looking more serious than usual. "Sir," Mark began, his voice steady, "we've uncovered more about the syndicate behind these threats. It's bigger than we thought." The billionaire didn't flinch. "What's going on?" "They've been operating for years, using legal businesses to funnel money and cover their tracks. And it's not just them. There are people in powerful positions that are protecting them, people who have a stake in keeping this network alive," Mark explained, his tone grim. The billionaire ran a hand through his hair, his mind racing. "I should have seen this coming," he muttered. "There's no way to clean up a mess like this without getting dirty." Mark nodded. "It's going to take time. We're going to need more resources, more allies. But it's possible. We can take them down." The billionaire looked out the window again, his reflection staring back at him. He had always prided himself on being the one who had control, who could shape his destiny with money and influence. But now, he was being forced to confront something much more complicated. A system of corruption that went deeper than he could have imagined. "I've been fighting the wrong battles," he said quietly, his voice tinged with regret. "For too long, I've been looking out for myself, for my empire. But I should have been looking at the bigger picture. I should have been using my position to fight for people who need help, not just those who can pay for it." Mark was silent for a moment before speaking again. "It's not too late, sir. We can make a difference. You can make a difference." The billionaire turned to face him, determination hardening in his gaze. "I will make a difference," he said, his voice resolute. "I'll take whatever steps necessary. We'll break this network apart, and we'll make sure that Anna and every child like her has a future free from fear." Mark nodded, a sense of relief in his expression. We'll start by reaching out to more organizations, setting up a network of allies who can help us. We'll bring in people who can help us expose this from the inside. The billionaire's mind was already moving faster than ever, calculating every possible move. He had to take this battle to places where money and power wouldn't help. He had to reach people who were willing to do the right thing, no matter the cost. As Mark left the room to begin making calls, the billionaire walked over to his desk and stared down at the papers in front of him. He knew that this was the path he had to take, no matter how difficult it would be. He couldn't go back to the way things were. The billionaire had made his choice, and now he would see it through. Anna had shown him the way, and he would not let her down. He would protect her, and he would fight to make the world a better place for people like her. For the first time in years, he felt like he was truly on the right path. The road ahead was unclear, but he knew that he was no longer walking it alone. The billionaire sat in his office, his hands resting on the desk in front of him, his mind still racing from the events that had unfolded. The men who had threatened Anna were behind bars, their syndicate starting to fall apart, but the work was far from over. There was so much more that needed to be done, and he knew he had only just begun to make the kind of difference that truly mattered. The reality was setting in. This wasn't going to be easy. As much as he had hoped for a quick resolution, the fight against the corruption and the network of criminals was a complicated one. He had to confront his own past, the choices he had made, and the influence he had used to build his empire. But now, that power was going to be used for something more important, something bigger than money. It was going to be used to rebuild trust in the system, to create opportunities for those who didn't have a voice. The billionaire glanced at the phone on his desk. A message from Mark flashed across the screen. "We've got another lead. They've been tracking Anna's movements. We need to act fast." His heart skipped a beat. He had promised to protect Anna, and he wasn't going to let anyone get to her. Not now, not ever. Without hesitation, he picked up the phone and dialed Mark's number. "I'll meet you at the safe house in 20 minutes, he said, his voice calm but filled with urgency. "Make sure Anna's there, and keep her safe." The tension in the billionaire's body was palpable as he grabbed his coat and headed out of the office. The stakes were higher than ever, and this time, it wasn't just about stopping the men who had hurt Anna, it was about dismantling the very system that allowed them to exist in the first place. He had been a part of that system for so long, using his wealth and influence to protect himself, to keep his business running smoothly. But now, he understood the true cost of that kind of power. It wasn't just the people who suffered, it was the future that was being stolen from those who deserved it most. As he drove through the city, his mind replayed the conversations he had had with Anna. Her strength, her courage, her determination, they had all shaped him in ways he hadn't anticipated. She had shown him what it meant to truly live with integrity, to fight for something greater than oneself. And now, it was his turn to make things right. When the billionaire arrived at the safe house, he saw Mark and the team already gathered outside. Anna was inside, hidden away from the world that had tried to tear her down. The billionaire walked inside, his footsteps echoing in the quiet house. He could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him, but he refused to let it stop him. "What do we know?" he asked, his voice steady but urgent. Mark handed him a file. "They're tracking her every move, but we've intercepted some of their communications. They're planning to make a move tonight. We don't know where or when exactly, but they're getting closer." The billionaire's blood ran cold. He wasn't going to let anyone hurt Anna. Not again. "We need to move fast. Get her out of here. Now," he said, his voice sharp with authority. The team quickly went to work, setting up a secure route to get Anna to safety. The billionaire walked over to her, his heart in his throat. She was sitting in the corner of the room, her eyes focused on the ground, her body tense. As soon as she saw him, she stood up, her expression guarded but calm. "What's going on?" she asked quietly, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. The billionaire met her gaze, his heart swelling with pride and fear. "They're still after you," he said, his voice soft but firm. "But we're getting you out of here. You're not going to be in danger anymore. I promise." Anna nodded, her face unreadable, but there was a flicker of relief in her eyes. She trusted him, and for that, he would do anything to keep her safe. As the team prepared to move out, the billionaire stayed close by Anna's side, his hand hovering near hers but not touching. He wanted to give her space, to let her feel in control, but he also wanted her to know that he was there, that he would protect her no matter what. The plan was set, and they had to move fast. The streets outside were dark, the city quiet, but there was a palpable sense of urgency in the air. As they made their way to the vehicle, the billionaire couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to go wrong, but he couldn't let fear dictate his actions. He had made a promise, and he was going to keep it. He wasn't going to let Anna fall victim to the same system that had hurt so many others. As they reached the car, the billionaire paused for a moment, looking back at the house they had just left. He knew this was the end of one chapter and the beginning of another. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: he wasn't walking it alone. Anna had shown him what it meant to fight for something that mattered, and now he was ready to fight for her. The billionaire and his team had successfully gotten Anna to a safe location, but the fear and urgency had not yet subsided. He stood at the window of the temporary hideout, his eyes fixed on the streets below. His thoughts were racing, not just about Anna's safety, but about what was coming next. The threats were not just from a few criminals. This was bigger, much bigger. The syndicate, the system that had allowed men like them to operate in the shadows, had to be dismantled. And it was up to him to do it. He had been a powerful man in the business world, but now he was facing a different kind of challenge, one that went beyond wealth and influence. It was about confronting a network that had been allowed to thrive under the radar for too long. The billionaire had come to realize that power was not just about what you could control, but what you were willing to fight for. And now, with Anna's life at stake, he was fighting for something he had never truly fought for before. He was fighting for the people. As the team gathered around the table to discuss their next move, the billionaire's mind was made up. They had already intercepted more communications from the syndicate, and it was clear that their enemies were not backing down. The men who had threatened Anna were only the beginning. "We need to go after the people behind this," the billionaire said, his voice steady but filled with determination. "We can't just stop here. We need to take this down from the top." Mark nodded, his face grim. "We've been gathering information, sir. The people at the top are well protected. But we can't just sit back and wait for them to make a move. We need to take action now, before it's too late." The billionaire turned to the rest of the team, his eyes narrowing with resolve. "This is personal now. It's not just about business anymore. It's about making sure no one else goes through what Anna has been through. We're not going to stop until this network is gone." The room was filled with a charged silence as everyone took in his words. It was clear that the billionaire wasn't just talking about protecting Anna anymore. He was talking about something much bigger, something that would change the course of their fight against corruption. "We need to expose them," the billionaire continued, his voice calm but filled with a new sense of purpose. "We need to make sure that the people who are protecting these criminals know that we're not backing down. We're going to take them out of the shadows and into the light. We're going to make sure they can never hurt anyone again." The room erupted in agreement. The team knew that this was their chance to bring down a powerful network, but they also knew the risks. Going after powerful people meant facing powerful enemies. The billionaire didn't care. He had already made his choice. They spent the next few hours discussing their plan of action. They would work with law enforcement, gather evidence, and use their connections to expose the corruption from within. The fight ahead would not be easy, but the billionaire had no doubts. He had the resources, the drive, and the support of his team. Most importantly, he had Anna's trust, and he would not let her down. As they finalized their plans, the billionaire felt a shift within himself. For the first time in years, he was fighting for something that wasn't just about him. It was about making a real difference in the world. He looked at his team, seeing the same determination reflected in their eyes. They were ready. "We go now," he said, standing up from the table. "We do this for Anna, and we do it for every person who has ever been silenced by fear." The team moved quickly, gathering their things and preparing for the next phase of their mission. As the billionaire stepped outside into the cold night air, he took a deep breath, feeling the weight of the journey ahead. The road was going to be long, and it was going to be dangerous, but he wasn't afraid. He had already come this far, and he would see it through to the end. He knew that no matter what, he couldn't stop now. He had a responsibility to the people who had been hurt, to the children who were still facing the kind of threats Anna had endured. He had made his choice, and he wasn't going to turn back. As they drove toward their destination, the billionaire's mind was clear. He was no longer the same man who had walked into that alley all those days ago. He had been changed by Anna's courage, and now he was ready to change the world. It wasn't going to be easy, but he had never been more determined. He would fight for a future where people like Anna didn't have to face the darkness alone, and he would make sure that no one ever had to endure the fear she had lived through again. The final blow came quickly. With the evidence they had gathered, the team worked relentlessly, and in just a few weeks, the syndicate was exposed. The powerful figures behind it began to fall one by one, their dirty deeds coming to light in ways they never expected. The billionaire, now a man transformed by the experience, watched from the sidelines, knowing that this victory wasn't just his. It was a victory for every person who had been silenced, for every child who had ever faced fear without a voice. The work was far from over, but the damage had been done. The network that had once seemed untouchable was crumbling. He had used his resources to make sure they could never harm anyone again, and the impact rippled through every part of the world they had touched. As he sat in his office, staring at the screen that showed the last of the men who had threatened Anna being arrested, a strange sense of peace washed over him. This was what true power felt like, not wealth or influence, but the ability to protect, to fight for what was right. The journey that had started with Anna's courage had led him here, to this moment of clarity. He had promised her that he would protect her, and he had kept that promise. But more than that, he had learned a lesson that would stay with him forever. That power was not about control, but about responsibility. Anna's influence on him had been nothing short of revolutionary. She had shown him that even the smallest voice, the quietest heart, could change the world. It wasn't just about standing up to the bullies, it was about taking action, even when it seemed impossible. She had done that, and now he had done the same. The billionaire looked out the window of his office. The city sprawled below him, a city he had once seen as nothing more than a playground for the wealthy. Now, he saw it differently. He saw the faces of the people who lived there, the people who would benefit from the changes that had come. He thought of Anna, of how far she had come, and how much she had taught him, and he made a vow to himself, to her, to everyone who had ever been affected by the system of corruption that had been allowed to thrive. He would continue fighting. He would continue using his power for good, and he would make sure that no one would ever have to face the darkness alone again. As the door to his office opened, Mark stepped in, his face tired but satisfied. "We did it, sir," Mark said, his voice filled with a quiet pride. "It's over." The billionaire nodded slowly, a smile tugging at his lips. "Yes," he said softly, "it's over," but he knew it wasn't the end. It was just the beginning of something new, something bigger than any one person. Together, with the people who had supported him, with Anna by his side, he was going to make sure that this world was one where courage, kindness, and justice would always win. He was no longer the man who had only cared about his empire. He was the man who had learned the true cost of power and the true value of standing up for what's right. And as he looked ahead, he knew that no matter the challenges that came his way, he was ready to face them. He was ready to keep fighting, to keep changing, to keep protecting. The world had already started to change because of him, and he wouldn't stop until the transformation was complete. Discover the powerful journey of transformation in this gripping black story, where a young girl's courage and a billionaire's redemption intertwine. The story unfolds as a billionaire, once consumed by power and wealth, finds himself changing after an encounter with a brave young girl named Anna. As threats emerge from a dangerous criminal network, he is forced to confront his past and use his resources for something far more important than profit. The Black Story not only highlights Anna's unshakable bravery but also shows how one individual's actions can ripple through the world, challenging systemic corruption. Through their combined strength, the billionaire and Anna work together to bring down the syndicate and protect the future of vulnerable children. This Black Story serves as a reminder that courage, justice, and empathy are the true forces that drive meaningful change. With each step, the billionaire learns from Anna, realizing that true power is not in wealth but in using one's position to make a real difference. Follow this journey of redemption and protection as it explores the value of doing what's right over what's easy. Through this Black Story, experience the transformation of a man who once only saw the world through the lens of money into someone determined to change it for the better. From protecting Anna to dismantling a criminal empire, this story demonstrates how personal growth can lead to powerful societal change. Black stories like this are a testament to the strength of individuals who fight for justice and the belief that change is always possible, no matter the obstacles.